Hey, it's the Profit Answer Man, Rocky Lalvani. As you listen to today's episode, pay close attention to the story about Costco and why big sales may not be the best way forward. For those of you who are new to the show, check out my interview with Mike Michalowicz. It's episode 2. If you want to hear about each chapter in the Profit First book, go back and listen to episodes 3 through 13. Episode 1 is the why and how. 80% of business owners hate accounting, and I don't blame them. But you need someone to help you make good financial decisions. Many bookkeepers and their accountants are bad at this. Plus, they don't think like you. You need someone on your team to help you make great financial decisions that ensure you have the time and freedom to do what you love. Remember, more revenue does not equal more profit. That's why we focus on the bottom line. Today I have on Michelle Weinstein, and we're going to chat about appropriately increasing the top line while being focused on the bottom line. Let's meet our guest. Hi, Michelle Weinstein. It's great to have you here on the Profit Answer Man podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I love the topic of profit. So I was like, this is perfect.
And everyone should learn and love the topic of profit, and they should know how to generate it. So you are in business for yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about your business?
Yeah. So my current business is under the umbrella of my brand called The Pitch Queen. So if you go to thepitchqueen.com, and basically I like to say I'm a time-tested entrepreneur. So I've had 20 years of sales experience. I had a prepared meal business that failed under my belt. So I know what it's like to pretty much lose everything. I've pitched on Shark Tank, and I've done a whole slew of things and worked with billion-dollar companies and got our products in Costco and Vitamin Shop with my last company. However, didn't have Mike's book, Profit First, at the time. So now I'm all about number 1, profit, number 2, paying myself, and number 3, having money for expenses. So that's a little bit about me. And for those entrepreneurs that want to learn how to sell more, we'll talk a little bit about that and how you can continue to follow me. But majority of my time is now spent really helping accountants learn that the nucleus of their business is sales. So a lot of accounting professionals come to me to learn the most efficient and powerful ways that they can grow their firm, increase revenues, talk about pricing, finding ideal clients, improving and increasing cash flow, how to set boundaries with the types of clients that they work with, and so they can stop really giving away their advice complimentary, which I'm sure some of you guys have experienced with your accountants. And so they can really start, following the profit first model of making sure their firm has profit, making sure they pay themselves well, and then having money for their expenses. So that whole business is called The Abundant Accountant. And I have 2 podcasts. One for all of you is called Success Unfiltered, where I interview entrepreneurs, everyone from service-based businesses to big companies that you probably have heard of, like Justin from Justin's Peanut Butter, or Hint from, the founder of Hint from Hint Water. And we talk about the failures and the rejections that stop us, and those things that stop us from really improving our cash flow, which is increasing our sales. And so that's called Success Unfiltered. You can listen to it on Apple Podcast or any podcasting platform that you have. I also interview one Shark Tank veteran every month, too. So I've been doing that for almost 3.5 years. That's a little bit about me.
And thank you for sharing. So you've mentioned a couple words that are always near and dear to the heart. One is profit. One is paying yourself first. And, of course, making sure that you have good cash flow, because when that happens, everything is wonderful. And when it doesn't, well, that's when we all have headaches and we cringe and we don't sleep at night. So,
yeah, I know about those sleepless nights. There's like a whole week of my life that I don't think I slept. And, it's because we were just, burning too much cash for the amount of revenue coming in and couldn't manage the cash flow, especially if your business has inventory, has cost of goods sold. it makes it even 50 times harder, which why implementing profit first and hiring you, Rocky, is probably the number one thing I would have done differently about 10 years ago. But now I have a service-based business, and my profit first model is just have $100,000 in liquidity in the bank and always pay myself really good, have a lot of money for profit and plenty of money for expenses.
And I always say the best system is the system that works for you. And if that works for you, then it's awesome. You've clearly mastered it. So what were the mistakes that you made in your past business that caused you all these cash flow problems?
I would be here for a really long time, but I think a lot of people, we don't start a business saying, okay, I'm going to give it my all, my blood, sweat, and tears for 10 years and then have to close it. So with that being said, there were a lot of hiccups along the road that you don't really think about. And I talk a lot about these stories in Success Unfiltered in my podcast, but a few just off the top of my head that I probably bet none of you plan for in your business are like, legal fees. We dealt with so many different attorneys, employee issues. If you have staff over 25, there's just so many bumps in the road and hiccups along the way. So that was a big killer for us. Attorney fees. Another one are mistakes. You don't think about the mistakes that you're going to have. And we were shipping fresh prepared meals. And I'll never forget, I was actually sharing this with my boyfriend the other night. One of the biggest mistakes we made was maybe not having the best QC process in place. And every week we would ship meals. And I would say about this day, there were 40 to 50 boxes that got picked up by FedEx with the wrong label on it. So they were shipped with the wrong date, which means that the boxes left and came right back the next day, which with fresh prepared meals, it was bad. So not only did we have to eat the cost on all the raw inventory, the shipping costs, the product, but then we had to remake it all and do it all again. So talk about not having profit. It's such a low margin business to begin with that any single mistake, it was so costly. And I think a lot of the food entrepreneurs that I've interviewed on Success Unfiltered, you will hear a common theme, right? Like one of my friends, Jayla, she also pitched on Shark Tank, had a company called Bonafare, and Mark Cuban had invested in her. I remember vividly she was sharing how, her product had to be bottled at a manufacturer for the wine spritzer that she was selling. And all the caps on the whole thing were bad. So they had to basically toss that whole run of product. And her investors had to fund more in order to redo it. So I think these are a lot of things that we just don't think about as business owners. And when you're going at 150 miles an hour every single day, there's really no one kind of in the background saying, hey, have you thought about that you might need 50,000 in a bank account for just in case of this? Or, what you've probably been taught or might have learned over the years, always have 6 months of reserves in your personal account for if something happens. Well, how come we don't use that same method in our businesses, right? And I think that that's really important in knowing that, I can run for 6 months to a year with no sales if, God forbid, something were to happen. So I think it's really important. And I think a lot of the businesses surviving and thriving during a pandemic, were set up properly. The businesses living paycheck to paycheck, it just doesn't work.
And that's very true. You do have to plan for hiccups because we all face storms and they come in a variety of different flavors, but they're always going to be there. And mistakes, they happen and you have to be ready for them. And you have to, as you talked about, those were teeny mistakes, right? But the teeny mistakes, a label, a bottle cap, ended up costing thousands upon thousands of dollars. And it's having those systems and processes in place to make sure that that doesn't happen to you.
Yeah. And I think also I interviewed Mike Michalowicz actually on Success Unfiltered. It was episode, I think 147, if you go look for it. And we talked about how saying no can bring you a lot of more, peace of mind. And I think if we said no to more of the opportunities that came my way, we probably would have been in a positive position, because every single thing you say yes to, be it a new client or, getting into Costco, it's like one more big problem that might not do anything really great for your cash flow.
Well,
So it was a great episode. Highly recommend listening to it, because it really is a game changer when we can say no, focus on your core business, improving cash flow, improving profitability on, the 80% of where most of your revenue is coming from. So 80% of your revenue is typically generated from just your top 20% of your clients or top 20% of your SKUs. And that was for us. We had, 80%, like, so if we had 100,000 in revenue one month, 80,000 of revenue came from probably our top 20% of our SKUs that we had at the time.
and it's making sure that those 20% of SKUs are your most profitable too, because if they aren't, that is a problem. Can you explain, like, when you get into Costco, how does that work from a cash flow standpoint that you're creating?
Yeah, that's the part where, it's so funny. Like, Costco gave us a guaranteed PO, and it was for half the regions in the country. But we didn't have the cash flow to fund the inventory. So I was out there trying to get investor money to fill our cash bank in order to, fund the bakery. So I would say for cash flow on a Costco deal, you need to have like 9 months to a year of funds available, liquid, ready to go. Because manufacturer, most of them won't start production unless they're paid 50% up front. So let's just go with a $100,000 PO that you get, right? So immediately out the door, 50,000 goes to the bakery. Then they produce your product, and 90 days later, you owe the other 50 grand. So now you're out 100 grand. The delivery goes to Costco, and it then sells, and then it takes time. And then they pay you, depending on your terms you set up, but most likely 30 days from the time the product is sold, Every deal is a little different. It's all how you negotiate it. So right there, you're at about maybe a 6-month lag. And then what if it sells really well? That was the other problem. So then your product sells really well. You need another 100 grand about 6 months later to start the process all over again. 50,000 to the bakery, 50,000 when you pick it up. By that time, your old inventory is almost sold through. Costco needs another delivery to their warehouse, and you're in this vicious cycle. So I would say on a $100,000 PO, you need about 3x of that ready to go every probably 90 days. 100,000 right away, 100,000 90 days later, 100,000 90 days later, until your profitability can fund and cash flow itself. But depending on what you're selling, food, you're lucky if you get 10, 20% margins. So
And that's
how it works.
I think more often than not, business owners go, yay, we got the Costco order. They don't think about the fact that how are they going to fund it? Because it is
I couldn't fund it. We did a road show. We did all that. We had the PO. No one would give me the money for the PO. Actually, when I had it in hand, it wasn't quote unquote risky enough at the point. Well, the other investments that I had throughout for the whole company were, I guess, riskier. So the investors said, yeah, so it's just so fascinating. But if you don't have a line of credit to draw on your own, then you need to figure out how you're going to fund it, because it's not just the first PO. You have to figure out, well, if this sells through, how many years or months until this cash flows on its own where you don't have to pull from a line of credit or an investor or a credit card in order to front your inventory? Because I haven't met anybody who will manufacture a product or do anything without getting paid right away, at least 50%.
And that is very true. You also mentioned another thing, which is tight margins. And that's something that I think people don't realize. Even if you have the ability to buy something and mark it up 100%, that's really not enough margin for many businesses. You're going to struggle. What have you seen with regards to that?
Well, I work with accountants now, and wherever their pricing is, we raise it about 300% typically, because even for them, it's not enough, and then a lot of you entrepreneurs might be like, gosh, we're selling a lot of product. We're getting repeat orders, but why are we still not making any money to the bottom line? And that's the reason, because if you don't have, we just had so many SKUs. We had way too many SKUs. If you can taper down what your offerings are, that's more manageable to really figure out what is the real cost, and then what is the, amount or percentage you're going to add to that cost for mistakes and for all the other problems that we just don't think about as business owners. I didn't think, I'm going to have to deal with this. We got into Costco. Oh, well, we can't even deliver the product because I can't afford to make it. So, having the money at hand and really, I would say tripling whatever you think your margin, if you think you should sell it for 10, my guess is you need to sell it for $30. Whatever it is, your sales, you probably need to double or triple wherever you're at, in order to get your margins in line after you have profit built in, your pay built in, and then your money for expenses.
So what do you do when you're in a business that the market will not bear
anymore?
Right.
Yeah, that's what happened to us. I had to close my business. It was March 29th or March 27th of 2017. We couldn't charge any more for food. And I think you're seeing, just food in general with the pandemic, a lot of businesses closed. There's a certain amount of money you can charge for a meal, a regular non-fancy dinner, you can pretty much only charge between $10 and $15. So it's figuring out how to improve efficiency, how to get your cost of goods down from your suppliers. Obviously, buying in bulk, it helps a ton. But in order to buy in bulk, you need to have a really high positive cash flow in order to fund the reduced expenses. And most food businesses just aren't able to do so in the beginning. And then tapering down your offerings, simplifying, making it as specific and niche as possible. I was actually talking to my old landlord yesterday, Barry, because I'm like his real estate agent now. I rent out my kitchen too. So there's a company, Pete, with Pete's Paleo. It's delicious. Highly recommended if you're absolutely sick of cooking, hate doing dishes, everything that I hate and why I started a meal prep business. But Pete's Paleo ships nationwide, and he took over my lease. Pete's Paleo never took out any investor money. He also opened another kitchen in Atlanta, but was able to do so because he was so niche specific. It was only paleo meals, and he stuck through it the whole time. Even when Plated and Blue Apron came in the picture and everything else, he got so specific on who his customer was and what their offerings were. And there weren't that many options every week. And I think we were just a little too general and a little too broad. And when you go like that, you're it's bound for not the best outcome, which is closing. Because if you can't manage the cash and the margins just aren't there, unless you're doing it for a nonprofit and just doing it for a hobby, that's an expensive hobby, I must say. And it also, Rocky, it speaks volumes. And even when I started my podcast, Success Unfiltered, after that failed business, I wanted to interview entrepreneurs about the no's and the rejections they had. And so many of my interviews are Shark Tank vets. And I should have called the podcast, rejections from Shark Tank vets. It should have been that specific. It would have, that podcast would have grown 10x what my other one is. And my other podcast is called The Abundant Accountant. It tells you exactly what it is. It's how accountants can create abundance in their life, in their revenue, and their profitability in all forms and aspects of their life. That podcast surpassed my other one that I had for 3.5 years, and the Abundant Accountant I've had for 2 years, with a sponsor every single month for almost the last 1.5 years. So if you can, and I'm sure you've heard it 8 million times, niche down, get specific. Who's your ideal client you're talking to? Who's that one person? You'll be like Pete, in the sea of so much competition in fresh prepared meals. Even my old landlord said he got so busy during COVID because, there was all the restaurants were only to go, and, people didn't want to leave their house. So he was the delivery to your door. So I'm just super happy that he's sustained this for 13, 14 years now. It's incredible, with being so specific, having his probably cost of goods dialed in, having great relationships with his suppliers, and having the revenue to be able to fund, the monthly nut that one of these businesses costs to operate.
And that's very important to know what your nut is and be able to fund it and get down into the niches. And I did the same thing. This podcast is called The Profit Answer Man. You know why you're here, right? You're here to learn how to be more profitable in your business. And I learned that lesson with my other podcast. You really have to be specific on who you're talking to and what you're helping them with. And so,
yeah, I've already been through my $2 million MBA program, so you all can learn from all my mistakes, because I made the mistake again with Success Unfiltered. You're probably like, why is it Success Unfiltered? I mean, it was raw, real stories, that like 8, 10-figure entrepreneurs shared, Shark Tank vets, authors, performers. It was just too much all over the place. Is it a great podcast? Yes. Have you guys probably heard of it? No, probably not. Probably doesn't even pop up on iTunes, But if it were called, The Untold Truth About Shark Tank, now you guys are going to hear all the awesome stories about what really goes on behind the scenes, because I've interviewed so many of them, but it was just not specific enough in the title and the description. And I said, okay, I think I'm done with my mistakes, Rocky. I'm going all in. And now the Abundant Accountant is thriving in all ways, sideways. I love it. It makes me happy every day to do what I do. And, if I can help you, the entrepreneur listening, reduce the cost of your mistakes, then that makes me happy too.
And that's a big part. Mistakes are something that really cost us a lot. And the more mistakes you can avoid by learning from others, the less you have to pay the price. Let somebody else pay the price for your mistake.
Exactly. Yep.
So let's just chat a little bit, because this is a part of the process that I think entrepreneurs don't realize. All entrepreneurs need to be salespeople, because essentially that's what you're doing. You're selling your business, you're selling your idea, you're selling your products. And how important do you find the sales part of the whole entrepreneurship?
I mean, the sales process is your livelihood. I remember at ProfitCon, I was there with Mike 2 years ago with Mike and Ron. And I was like, Mike, you can't even do profit first if you don't have sales. The first thing on your P&L for any business owner is revenue or sales, depending on what it says in your QuickBooks. But that if you don't have that, then how can it be sales minus profit equals your expenses, right? How can you, like Mike says, eradicate the entrepreneurial poverty if you don't have any sales? Sales is the nucleus of your business. And so I focus so much on that for my accountants, because, they've just never been taught a sales process, which is no problem, not their fault. They just thought, if we're going to open up an accounting firm, I'll have plenty of people to talk to. But, Rocky, there's a lot of accountants out there. So how do you differentiate yourself in order to attract entrepreneurs, what you're doing with this podcast? So I have some really simple 5 steps that you all can follow. You can get it for free at sellwithoutsleaves.com. That's just my thing that I give away on these podcasts for entrepreneurs that, how can you do sales? How can you present and pitch your business? How can you meet with buyers without being a bother, without sounding desperate, without being a nag, without harassing anyone, and without doing it in a salesy and pushy way? So if you want to learn how to do that, you can at sellwithoutsleaves.com.
And I will put that in the show notes for everyone. Sellwithoutsleaves.com.
Yep.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. It was great to listen to your story and to understand the importance of cash flow and profit and paying yourself first all the time and avoiding mistakes. And remember, we've got to start by selling, right?
Yeah, it's everything. The sales process is your livelihood. It's your bloodline to your business's heart. So
very true. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
What was your biggest takeaway from today's episode? For me, understanding how getting that big deal with a company like Costco comes with a massive cash outlay up front. We have to be ready for that. We have to plan ahead. That's why we need to choose our battles wisely about what we're going after. Remember, profit is not an event, it's a habit. You don't need more resources, you need to be more resourceful. Remember, we always focus on the bottom line. We think our way to a solution versus spending our way towards solutions. If you want a done-for-you service, you can have me help you as your Chief Profitability Officer because you have your zone of genius and want to focus there. I only work with a handful of clients so they get my full attention. I usually work with business owners who are growing to $500,000 to $5 million in revenue. Use the scheduling link in the show notes to get on my calendar so we can chat and explore if we're a good fit for each other. If you want to learn more about living the life of your dreams, check out my other podcast, Richer Soul. As we close out, let's repeat the mantra. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Let's thrive and grow. Have a profitable week.